Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Nobody carries more momentum into 2021 than Oklahoma. The Sooners started a disappointing 1-2, but then won 8 straight games by an average of 24.5 points per game to end 2020, and that included a 6th straight Big 12 title and a blowout of Florida in the Cotton Bowl. The Sooners are once again the Big 12 favorites, but they have their eyes set on so much more. Can Lincoln Riley and his squad reach those goals? So again, guys, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, here to predict and analyze Oklahoma's schedule and record for this 2021 college football season. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and also make sure to check out everything down in that description below. We are getting so close to the beginning of college football season, so make sure to sign up for our expert picks. Our first picks will come out for week 0, and it includes just college and NFL picks this year. So don't miss out on that, as well as every other offer down in the description. So again, guys, look at this Oklahoma team. Won 8 straight games to conclude 2020. 8 straight games. Beat Iowa State in the Big 12 championship. They beat Florida in the Cotton Bowl. And now, as we mentioned, they're not just the favorite to win their 7th straight Big 12 title, but many have them pegged as a national title favorite. We've seen them make the playoffs before, but they've never made the national championship game in the playoff era. Can they do that this year? Well, when you look at the roster, you think they absolutely can. They returned 6 starters on offense, guys, an offense that we always know is electric under Lincoln Riley, one that averaged 43 points per game last year, one that is led by, for many, the Heisman Trophy favorite in quarterback Spencer Rattler, who threw for over 3,000 yards and 28 touchdowns last year in his first year as a starter in Norman. He has Kennedy Brooks coming back at running back. Brooks opted out last year due to COVID, but is opting back in now. Has rushed for over 2,000 yards and 18 touchdowns in his career. They added Eric Gray to provide some running back depth from Tennessee. And then they have a great wide receiver core with Marvin Mims, who had 610 yards last year. And they also added the Arkansas transfer and Mike Woods. This Oklahoma offense is absolutely loaded, and of course we would expect nothing less from Lincoln Riley. The defense, for many, has always been the downside for Oklahoma football, at least in the last few years, but they are drastically improving, and they've drastically improved every single year under defensive coordinator Alex Grinch. And this is going to be by far his best defense yet. The Sooners last year ranked 29th in the nation in scoring, allowed just 21.7 points per game. They ranked 9th in the country against the run, allowing just 105.1 rushing yards per game. And they ranked 29th in total defense, allowing just 350.6 rushing yards per game. They have talent at all 3 levels, defensive line, linebacking core, and in the secondary. Nick Bonito is back at linebacker after having 10.5 tackles for a loss and 8 sacks last year. Isaiah Thomas is back on the defensive line, who had 8.5 sacks last year. And then, of course, their secondary is loaded. They have Delaren Turner-Yell and Pat Fields leading the way back there as their, as some would say, quarterbacks of the defense, especially in that secondary. Oklahoma is loaded, guys, from top to bottom, and when you look at this schedule, it lines up very favorably for them. Their biggest games come at home, the biggest one obviously being Iowa State on November 20th. They, of course, have the date in Dallas against Texas, but they host an improving TCU team. They host a dangerous West Virginia team. They get Nebraska at home out of the non-conference. Everything lines up perfectly for another big year from Oklahoma. Let's go ahead and predict it. They open up the year at Tulane. We're going to chalk this up as a win. Tulane gave up 278.7 passing yards per game last year. That was 115th in the nation. Oklahoma, Spencer Rattler will exploit that big time. Awesome opportunity for Tulane, their fans, and their students, and their players to host Oklahoma, who will be a top 3 team at the beginning of the year. But the Sooners will dominate this game. It should be over by halftime. They then should dominate Western Carolina. They're 2-0. They then get Nebraska out of the Big 10. This is an old Big 12 rivalry matchup, guys. An old Big 12 matchup between the Cornhuskers and the Sooners. In Nebraska, they need a big year. And by big year, we just mean getting to 6-6. Scott Frost needs to get his team to a bowl game, and it's not looking likely. A lot of people disagree with that, but they have a lot of work cut out for them, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Nebraska wants to run the football. They averaged 201.4 rushing yards per game last year. That's great. But again, as we mentioned, Oklahoma had the 9th ranked rushing defense in the country last year. In Norman, with this type of defense, I think Oklahoma shuts down Nebraska, and I don't have faith in Adrian Martinez winning this game through the air. Oklahoma wins this game by at least 3 touchdowns at home. So 3-0, and then they get into Big 12 conference play. So they kind of really, I think, breeze through their non-conference. Nebraska, you can make the argument, will be the toughest of the non-conference, but you could also make an argument that Tulane might be the toughest out of those 3 teams. But regardless, they're 3-0, and their first Big 12 game is against West Virginia. And this is a dangerous team, guys. This West Virginia team is one that you need to watch out for in the Big 12. Now, we're not saying they're going to compete for a Big 12 title, but we are saying that they could pull off a few upsets here and there. And if this game was in Morgantown, I might be a little cautious if I were Oklahoma. But home field advantage, as we've said over and over again, it's going to play a very big role in this 2021 college football season. And that's going to be no exception here. While the Mountaineers did have the #1 passing defense in the country last year, while they did have the 4th overall defense in the country last year, allowing just 291.4 total yards per game, they lose a handful of key pieces on that defensive side of the ball. So those numbers might take a minor step back. And I just don't know if their offense has the capability to match Oklahoma step for step. Yes, Jarrett Dagey is back. Yes, Letty Brown is back. Yes, all of their top wide receivers are back. But they still are not as electric and as fast-paced as the Sooners are. On the road, West Virginia drops this game. Oklahoma should win relatively comfortably. They then go on the road to take on Kansas State. That's your big game, guys. That's the game that I think a lot of people are circling as a trap game just because of recent history. Chris Kleiman has upset Oklahoma the last 2 years. One's in Manhattan, and then last year in Norman, taking them down 38-35. Well, now it's in Manhattan again. Kansas State is certainly not afraid of the Sooners. We've seen that in the last 2 years. Doesn't matter where they play them, how good they are, how bad they are. They are not afraid of the top team in the Big 12. And you look at this Kansas State team now. Skylar Thompson returns from an injury. Got injured in the 3rd game of the year last year, was out for the season. He's back. Surprised a lot of people by returning. One of the best quarterbacks in Kansas State history. Deuce Vaughn is back. The do-it-all player out of the backfield. He returns. This offense should take a major step forward, and the defense does return 5 starters. They also have home field advantage on their side. But I do think there's something to be said for revenge. Certainly something to be said for revenge. Oklahoma's tired of losing to the Wildcats. And when you look at Kansas State, guys, the number I'm circling here is the fact they allowed 267.5 passing yards per game last year. And that is the worst mark in the Big 12. They finished last in the Big 12 last year when it came to stopping the pass. When you look at this Oklahoma offense, Spencer Rattler taking a major step forward, all the returning talent they have coming back, Oklahoma should torch Kansas State through the air. Maybe it's close, but I'm going to say it's not. I think Oklahoma really takes it out on the Wildcats, and they finally get a win in Manhattan. They then go on the road to Dallas to take on Texas. And that's another reason why the Kansas State game is always intriguing and why they need to watch out for the Wildcats is Oklahoma could always look ahead. They could be looking ahead to their game against Texas, but I don't think they do this time around. The Red River Showdown, guys. The Red River Showdown between Oklahoma and Texas. The Sooners have won 3 straight games. One of those, of course, included the 2018 Big 12 title. Also included last year's 4-overtime thriller, which the Sooners won 53-45. The last 7, guys, here's the thing about this. The last 7 regular season meetings between Oklahoma and Texas have been decided by 1 possession. And I would not be surprised in the slightest if we see yet another 1-possession game in Dallas this time around. Not too many people are high on Texas. Brand new head coach in Steve Sarkisian, brand new scheme. They went 7-3 last year and still got rid of Tom Herman. So everybody's kind of questioning, what will we see out of Texas? Well, I think you're going to see an electric offense, one of the best in the Big 12. Casey Thompson, a dual-threat quarterback coming in. Bijan Robinson, one of the best running backs in the country coming in. Joshua Moore at wide receiver. And we know Texas' defense, now led by Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator from Washington, now the defensive coordinator at Texas. The defense is going to be pretty solid. But the one thing I'm also looking at here again is very similar to the Kansas State game. Texas gave up 266.4 passing yards per game. Kansas State ranked last. Texas ranked second to last. Texas had the second worst passing defense in the Big 12 last year. I'm looking at this again. We know Oklahoma's going to air it out. Texas doing so many different changes. They're going to play their hearts out trying to take down their rival. I just don't see it happening. We're going to go with Oklahoma in this game. So the Sooners are undefeated. They are 6-0 halfway through their schedule. They go back home for a true home game and take on TCU. They beat the Horned Frogs 33-14 last year. Now look at TCU. They're going to improve. They went 6-4 last year. They have a chance to win in 8, maybe 9 games this year. They're kind of a Big 12 dark horse team, especially with Max Duggan, their dual threat quarterback, under center. Their defense was actually one of the better ones in the Big 12 last year as well. And their front seven, that defensive line and linebacking core, is going to be very, very difficult. So maybe they are able to create a little pressure on Spencer Rattler. Maybe Kennedy Brooks in this rushing attack doesn't have a big day. But the game is still in Norman, and I'm going to go with the Sooners here. They beat them by 19 last year, and I'm not seeing a 19-point swing. Even though both teams are improving, the key word is both teams are improving. That includes Oklahoma. They also have home field advantage. They get the win. They annihilate Kansas. They beat Kansas 62-9 last year. I think most Big 12 teams will take down Kansas this year. Don't expect much from Lance Leipold in his first year in Lawrence. So Oklahoma should get a really cruise to victory at Kansas. They'll rest their starters by halftime, in my opinion. They then take on Texas Tech. Many peg them as the second to worst team in the Big 12, only behind Kansas, or only Kansas being behind them. Texas Tech, they lost to Oklahoma 62-28 last year. We know they bring in a quarterback transfer in Tyler Shuck over from Oregon. We know they have 8 starters back on defense. Matt Wells needs to get something going down in Lubbock. But one of those wins isn't going to come against Oklahoma. They could flirt with bowl eligibility this year. But again, the defense has to take a major step forward. And if your defense isn't up to par, if you don't have at least a semi-decent defense, you're not going to beat Oklahoma. You're not going to stand a chance. And that same can be said right now for Texas Tech. So the Sooners, still undefeated, get their bye week at the beginning of November. One downside there is the fact they have to play 9 straight games before getting their bye week. No one ever wants that. But they get their bye week and they go on the road to play Baylor. They only beat Baylor 27-14 last year. And I'm not saying this is a trap game by any means, but Baylor wasn't all that great last year, just 2-7. And they hung with Oklahoma, kind of kept it respectable. Only had 13 points and held them to 27, 16 points below their season average. Well, Baylor we know is going to improve this year, and Oklahoma has Iowa State the very week after. So yes, they're rested taking on Baylor, but it's on the road, and they have their maybe biggest game of the year the next week. We're going to pick Oklahoma to beat Baylor, guys, but it might be a little bit closer than many think. They then take on Iowa State. That's the big game, guys. Look, this might be the first of 2 meetings in 2021. It was last year. These two teams met earlier in the year. Iowa State won that game in Ames. Then they met again in the Big 12 championship game, and Oklahoma got their revenge and defeated the Cyclones 27-21. So this is an opportunity, guys, for both these teams to get the resume-boosting win they need. And depending on how Iowa State's doing, maybe they're undefeated at this point. If they are, we're going to have a top 5 matchup on November 20th with the possibility that we'll see both these teams play again 2 weeks later with the playoff berth on the line. That's how important this game is and how exciting this game is. And Iowa State is no slouch. We just said a second ago, if you want a chance to beat Oklahoma, you have to have a semi-decent defense. Well, the Cyclones don't just have a semi-decent defense, they have an elite defense. 19 starters are back for the Cyclones, guys. 2 Heisman Trophy contenders on the same team in Brock Purdy and Breece Hall. The offense can meet and match Oklahoma step for step. The defense can slow down Spencer Rattler and this team. And I'm telling you this right now, if this game was in Ames, I would 100% be picking Iowa State. If it was Ames, I would be picking Iowa State. But the game is in Norman, and I'm going to go with Oklahoma here. I do truly, genuinely believe home field advantage plays that big of a role. And I do believe that Oklahoma is just slightly better on the offensive side of the ball. Another thing, too, Oklahoma's rushing defense was so elite last year, and Iowa State is going to want to run the ball with Breece Hall. If Oklahoma can hold Breece Hall to under 120 rushing yards, they absolutely do win this game. And I think they have just enough to do that. The Sooners win a close one against Iowa State. We've seen some classics between these two teams in recent years. We're going to see another one here, and I venture to say you might see another one just a few weeks later in the Big 12 championship. So Oklahoma, fresh off their biggest win of the year, still remains undefeated. They go to Bedlam. They play Bedlam against Oklahoma State. And look, the Sooners have dominated this rivalry series. They've won 6 straight against the Cowboys. Only one of those 6 has been decided by one possession. 6 straight games, only one of them decided by one possession. They annihilated the Cowboys last year. What was it, 41-13? I mean, it was embarrassing for Mike Gundy and his squad. And while his game is in Stillwater, while Oklahoma State does return a handful of key starters, namely Spencer Sanders at quarterback and the majority of their defense, they're not going to be able to keep up with the Sooners, guys. Lincoln Riley knows, hey, we're undefeated. We got one more win to clinch an undefeated regular season. Cannot afford to overlook this game. It's a rivalry game. I'm not seeing a 28-point swing in the span of 1 year, even with the Cowboys having home field advantage, which means we do have Oklahoma going 12-0 in 2021. 12-0 in 2021. They will be a top 3, could be top 2, depending on how the other elite teams across the country fare. Oklahoma maybe could be the number 1 team in the country going into the Big 12 championship game, because obviously they're going to make it being 12-0. Whether they face Iowa State or maybe it's somebody else, although Iowa State is the heavy favorite to meet them there, remains to be seen. But that means that 12-0 for Oklahoma, they'll be 1 win away from the college football playoffs, guys. And as many have said, many feel this could be the year they not just make the playoffs, but they finally break through and win and make the national championship game. This is absolutely the team to do it. Lincoln Riley has dropped at least 1 game every year as head coach of the Sooners. We don't think that happens this year. This team feels different. The Sooners are elite, and you need to watch out for them. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at The Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. Also, make sure to check out everything down in that description below, including those expert picks. Sign up for those today before the season starts. I promise you're not going to want to miss out on it. So make sure to go give that a look. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.